Hello, I hope all is progressing well. Welcome to I Don't Know, We Can Talk About It, where we discuss myriads of topics civilly, reasonably, and responsibly. My name is Kevin Dufresne. Our first topic is with regard to deep fakes. How might an educational environment address deep fakes, especially with legal dimensions set to address deep fakes? When one is observing the landscape of technology, one may find so many possibilities. The reality is, deep fakes are pervasive due to a popular capacity of a seemingly novel capacity. So individuals approach the technological dimensions with a different avenue to create a deepfake for whatever reason. When regarding how to implement the protections, I think being able to address the different realms of communication may prove extremely valuable if an educational environment is going to be engaging with the realms of deep fakes. The reason is the situation may happen outside of an educational environment. In such a situation, how is the educational environment set to really approach such a parameter? If such a situation happens within an educational environment, being able to approach the situation may prove easier. Additionally, if a deepfake undergoes creation and is difficult to trace back to a creator, then how might an educational environment proceed to address the creation of the deepfake, let alone the deepfake itself in existence? When observing how educational environments are able to address particular situations in alignment with technology, I think it's very important for educational environments to find ways to partner with entities so that third parties may have great effect to engaging with what may be happening on a platform through a technological parameter. So the educational environment is not overstepping, overreaching, over-engaging in a way that may be beyond the capacity of the educational environment's processes. The caring portion is critical. There are so many instances of bullying that may be happening in an educational environment, behavioral situations that require appropriate attention. So when an educational environment begins to address parameters which appear to be extending beyond the educational environment, I think it's really important to ensure good partnerships are available to address certain situations well. When any entity that is set for many purposes, and one of those avenues of the purposes is in connection with deepfakes, I think the entities really need to be set to attention with the possibilities of any environment, because the situation is realistically bigger than the educational environment, the entity of which one may create a deepfake through is extremely important to navigating how one may not only prevent creation of deepfakes, though prevent the permeability of the usage of deepfakes in an educational environment. And the educational environment from there may approach media literacy, so individuals are mindful, engaging with certain parameters of technology. The dimensions of an educational environment may differ greatly from the dimensions of the entity, which is a pathway for creating deepfakes. So an educational environment may intercede when and where possible, though the educational environment must be extremely mindful of the reality of the internet world outside of the educational environment, which is vast, which may bring to attention so many other factors that are easily able to be out of an educational environment's control, especially considering if any entity that may be observing an educational environment may have general access to information of an educational environment and may proceed with that access to near any capacity available. So I think when an educational environment is attempting to understand what may be possible to do, perhaps for an individual experiencing a deepfake experience, the educational environment can work to really address what supports may be available through an educational environment, especially when the situation might not involve anyone in the actual educational environment. So the individual is psychologically safe. Also, so the individual is aware that the deepfake is not fully representative of the individual, one small area of the conversation, and that the individual is going to have the supports necessary to continue performing well, increasing performance in the educational environment, in whatever the individual is growing through in connection with the educational environment, and that the family is receiving support from the educational environment to the most appropriate extents possible in ways that do not overextend the educational environment to a capacity which may affect how an educational environment is able to respond to other situations of an educational environment. So I think it's very important for educational environments to be extremely mindful of the broader realms aside from educational environment that are operating out of an educational environment's control so much that an educational environment may operate more efficiently by addressing what is possible to address carefully and mindfully, so as to prevent harm, encourage learning well, encourage better practices, and also be supported in the best available ways possible of reasonable proportions. There are so many areas that an educational environment may support through the appropriate capacities. there are many other instances of deepfakes that an educational environment may find is receiving attention in other ways outside of the educational environment. And if an educational environment wants to support those areas, then the educational environment may find ways to do so if the capacity of the educational environment allows for the educational environment to make way to do so. The other reality is the forms of bullying, especially considering cyberbullying, are going to be present and receive the same realm of attention if an educational environment recognizes its capacity. Because an individual might be playing an online video game that the individual enjoys and may be going through cyberbullying, which is separate again from the educational environment. That pertains to more of the domestic sphere. Though an educational environment may offer supportive avenues by way of media literacy to address cyberbullying in its totality, more so than because of one or two situations, particularly in an educational environment. So a well-rounding media literacy programming may be contributing to how an individual may be approaching different dimensions, especially dimensions that may be outside of an educational capacity's reach. So the educational environment can be very supportive and very mindful, and I think operating far more efficiently with respect to the boundaries that are and assessing what may be possible elsewhere. Because if an educational environment is really seeking to engage with individuals in a protective capacity in an online sphere, then one might think, is the educational environment looking to create online safety realms, perhaps online chat rooms that are with moderators from the school? Is the education environment seeking to create protective pathways to address how people communicate with each other in online capacities outside of the educational environment? When one comes into these kind of conversations, then one is really observing how an educational environment may be looking to actually support to a different capacity than what may be immediately available within an educational environment, physically, in the geographical, spatial reality. So I think there are many avenues that are possible, and there are many ways to address the situations of the article. I do feel as though the educational environment must recognize that the educational environment is not the only entity in the space of all that is going on in this very, very large world. Our next topic is with regard to grading. In South Carolina, the grading shift happens by legal attention, and the floor is open. So individuals may receive the grades the individuals earn. The article is engaging with the different ways that grading may be, purposes of grading differently, how grading may shift and how one may understand the grading shift between teacher, student, and parent. Though the article brings up these details, it is extremely important to understand what floor grades mean when translating to higher education, when administration or the board might be looking at how the grading is happening at a school, the comparative features, what might be contributing to the developmental factors of an educational environment on the basis of grades. What does one do if individuals are not earning the appropriate grades to address how a funding criteria might be operating with the grading structure? So when observing how different grading may be, one may think of many ways to grade. One may consider how participation may be in a classroom, how participation may undergo various forms of grading. When a person shows up for attendance, how showing up for attendance might count for a grade, and how the grades may be minuscule, may build up in different ways, how in-class homework may be beneficial for an individual to address how to balance between doing classwork and homework. So whatever one does not have complete in class becomes homework. So the individual has a long connecting trajectory. Or how there might be classwork and there might be homework, different areas of grading. How there might be extra credit pathways. So an individual may earn more than 100. An individual may earn a score that may be reflective of an individual's true capacity, and that scoring may operate with a form of a bonus. So if an individual is already doing well, earning 99s, 100s on work, then an individual opts to do an objectively graded course that is in alignment with the learning, though is like extra practice for an individual. The individual may proceed to get 125. And one may consider how grading to such a degree may be extremely valuable because the individual is showing the effort, and the individual may be able to earn to a capacity that is satisfying for the individual in perhaps more ways than one. Where there are educational environments that don't have grades by numbers, they'll have grades by scales of competencies. They'll have different grading systems that communicate different areas of well-being, of understanding, of comprehension, of practice. With the different levels of grading, the different styles of grading available, one may recognize that how one grades may be a way for one to address how individuals may need appropriate attention. Now, with a floor, one may argue that the floor, as the article mentions, may bring one to show a level of learning that shows improvement so that individual does not suffer from prior performance. The reality is a floor might work to that capacity to a degree, though if a class has different sections, one individual might know a section better than another section. One individual might need to work smarter with the different section than another section. So the learning needs addressing. If an individual needs help, then it is important that individuals are operating to receive the extra help. When individuals have chances to do work again, that the individuals are doing work again. There are educational environments that are very supportive to such a capacity. And there are educational environments that recognize, well, if an educational environment is to prepare individuals for the world outside of education, for future academic endeavors, then it is important that individuals are able to operate by due dates. It is important that individuals are able to recognize the importance of completing an assignment on time. It's a great part of time management. It's a great part of effort management, of work management, of process management, of organization. When individuals are consistently set in a pathway that does not acknowledge such dimensions, one may recognize, especially if individuals are going into higher education, the individuals that have yet to find such levels of organization, of optimal, satisfactory progress, may struggle greatly when entering an educational environment of higher education. Not having the extra space, leeway, may be extremely impactful to an individual's learning experience. So I think it's very important to be mindful of how an educational environment is culturing, especially beyond what an educational environment may feel is optimal on the basis of what may be reflective of an educational environment to a different entity, externally educational environment, to an entity that might not even be teaching in the classroom, to an entity that likely is going to be contributing to words and from a perspective that people might not even know about, though may be doing so in a way that does not really recognize what happens on a day-to-day basis with individuals in an educational environment, in a classroom. These type of details may seem conflicting when one is working in an educational environment and when one is assessing if one wants to actually be learning through an educational environment, because the learners might not know as much as what the individuals operating with an educational environment to an employment capacity may know. So the learners are going through processes, and the reality is, are the learners receiving the most appropriate attention? Whenever an educational environment sets any option of the employment aspect of an education environment above what is most suitable for the learner, then one must greatly consider what is exactly happening with the education environment, if the education environment is the most ideal for the learner. When considering these details, one must recognize that in a capacity where an individual has an assignment due, timelines, the work must be complete. The individual has to take care of the individual's self. Perhaps the individual has a family at that time. All these levels of organization are critical. And an educational environment that satisfies well the learning dimensions, ensuring individuals are aware of the connecting context to growth, as an educational environment is to be doing, then an educational environment is operating extremely well. This is not to say that it is easy for an educational environment to do so. Meaning, an educational environment may be doing everything wonderfully at a period of time that may be very, very different than the educational environment might be thinking to be working with, whether that be because of a pandemic, whether that be because of an influx of a population undergoing traumatic experiences, and the educational environment has to be able to attend to these differences of realities that are extending from traumatic experiences into the educational environment. It's very important to recognize that there are many forms of learning environments. So when engaging with these dimensions, one may recognize the importance of connecting individuals from the present to the future through the purposes of education, through the purposes of practices of what is happening in an educational environment. Ensuring individuals are aware the why and the how are important from this now into the future. Not because an educator wants an individual to do what the educator wants for the educator's sake, though for the purposes of the reality that the world outside of education has only opportunity available for what an individual's efforts are going to be connecting with. So, however one is acting, bringing one's efforts into the world outside of an educational environment, the consequences, and consequences may be good or otherwise, will be more so available to connect with the individual's efforts. So an educational environment operating by way of grading structures that may be differentiating from a different educational environment may need to address the reality of the social structuring of one's locale, though in consideration with the progression of South Carolina, one recognizes the state function is ideal, because that means that if an educational environment of higher education is looking to engage with accepting individuals into their higher education institutes, the individuals will be of a group of individuals that are of a different grading parameter. The question of who is going to benefit will greatly depend on admissions of a higher education institute and how the connective structures between the different levels of education develop. There may be many different ways to approach grading. Even so, the better connecting of the comprehensions of purposes through an educational environment may greatly benefit how individuals even approach education, how individuals approach life beyond education, and of course, how conversations develop with regard to how different levels of education even connect and adhere to what may be happening of different levels so that there is better connectivity. All right. It's time for some origami. So I have here a square sheet of paper. It's already with a fold split down the middle. Now all we're gonna have to do here is just gonna fold in a wing here. And we're gonna fold in the other wing as well, so that we have somewhat of a kite's form. It doesn't have to be a perfect fold, but close. Then we can fold down the middle here. And when we fold down this middle, have somewhat of an upside down triangle. And we'll bring in the corners to the middle. So we can have here our base shape if you start with this form of the folding. Next, we have here another square shape. So what we're gonna do here is we are gonna just have this folding here, and we're gonna fold again after that half fold up from our square, from the diamond into a triangle. We're gonna just fold up each point from the triangle to the middle, as so. From here, we're just gonna take the span out about halfway, just fold it out so that you have a wing coming out, and then you'll have the other fold coming out after you do similarly to the other side. Here's the trick. If you're looking at the instructions, you'll find that the instructions use glue to make this origami carrot stick together, the leafy portion and the carrot. What we're gonna do here is just from this carrot base, just gonna rip the top portion. So I'm gonna fold a little bit down across. See that little fold? It's just a little fold. And I'm just gonna rip it across that fold in case there might not be any glue available, or tape, or any other adhesive. And from here, I'm just gonna open this, just so I have that front portion where there's a lock in. Okay, so where I have that front portion open here. And I'm going to bend this portion, so I'll have a 3D-ish forming of the carrot leaves. Pop it out a little bit. And then voila, I have a carrot here. It fits in pretty good, huh? The glue can be ideal though. Alrighty. The hero with 1,000 faces. I champion reading physical books. When an individual reads a physical book, there are a lot of health benefits, one of which is the brain physically changes while an individual is reading a physical book. This connects with the science of spatial development. So when addressing how the text engages many cultures to examine how the myths, the stories, the engagements of character, the character developments operate from similar bases of storytelling, of structuring, of meaning development. As different as the stories may be, the stories carry great relevance to great depths of great variety. So what one may gather from each development is not only of structural alignment, one may recognize the text engages with how the structures of the stories come to be, so as to regard how the storytelling structure develops and connects with parameters that may be of psychoanalysis, the psychological realm. Even so, one may benefit from understanding how a culture may be through a story, through the meaning available through a story. The other dimension of the text is really connecting individuals to find empowerment, to find growth through the comprehensions of these different realms of stories and myths and the aspects of each of different levels. What I find is the relevance does not remain there in the story. The rooting of understanding may shift and vary per person, per life, though the practicality beyond the story, with the comprehension of meaning, with the embracing of meaning, really adds a different element of progress for one to address in one's life, so one may proceed with the knowledge, the transmission of information to a capacity that may be enlightening for one, that may assist one with better engaging how one wants to subculture, though how one may understand how happenings are in one's life and how one may address the future with attention to what the future may mean in connection with oneself, though beyond oneself alone. The text is very thorough, very informing, and offers a platform of information for one to use to navigate other developments, whether one is a creator, whether one is operating of a capacity to better comprehend, whether one is seeking to become better analytically of different dimensions. The text offers so many pathways for one to address what one may be encountering, for what one may encounter, and may be wonderful for an individual to better comprehend what one feels like one already experiences in life, in the different realms of stories and myths, so one may better reflect. Thank you for joining. I don't know. We can talk about it. Onward and Upward, Kevin Dufresne.